Hey, I'm Linda Bennett, and in today's video, I want to talk to you about 5 things that I genuinely wish someone had told me years ago. 5 habits, or maybe more accurately, 5 mistakes, that are quietly working against your strength, your energy, and your hormonal balance if you're a woman in your 60s. Now here's what I want you to understand before we get into it. After menopause, and especially as we move through our 60s, our bodies become more sensitive to everything we do and everything we don't do. The choices that maybe didn't matter as much in our 40s, they matter now, a lot. And the truth is, most of us were never told this. We were told to eat less, move more, accept the changes, and not complain. What we were not told is that there are specific things, common, everyday things that most women are doing without thinking, that are actively working against the body we're trying to maintain. And I'm going to show you all 5 of them. But I also want to tell you right now, stay with me until the very end of this video, because I'm going to talk about 2 foods that I have right here with me. Things that seem like perfectly healthy choices. Things that well-meaning articles and well-meaning friends have probably recommended to you at some point. And I want to explain to you exactly why, depending on how you're using them, they could be quietly working against your strength and your hormonal health. So please don't leave before we get there. I'm not a doctor, I'm not a trainer or a nutritionist. I'm a 66-year-old woman from Asheville, North Carolina, who spent 33 years working in public school administration, retired at 59, and then slowly, little by little, rebuilt my health from the ground up starting at 60. I share what helped me. That's all this is. So let's get into it. 5 things that could be silently working against your body after 60. Number 1 is stress. I know, you've heard this before, we all have, but I want you to hear it differently today because I think most women don't fully understand what chronic stress is actually doing inside their bodies and why it hits differently after 60. Here's what I realized when I started paying closer attention. When your stress levels go up, your body produces a hormone called cortisol. You may have heard it called the stress hormone. And what cortisol does, what its job is to prepare your body for a threat. It signals something dangerous is happening. Put everything else on hold. Survival now. The problem is that our bodies can't tell the difference between being chased through the woods and sitting at a kitchen table worrying about a doctor's appointment or a difficult conversation with a family member or something in the news. The body just reads, stress, respond. And here's where it becomes directly relevant to the way we feel and look and age. Cortisol is, in a very real sense, the enemy of everything we're trying to build. It breaks down muscle tissue. It signals the body to store fat, particularly around the abdomen. It disrupts sleep. It suppresses the hormones that support energy, mood, bone density, and vitality. And it doesn't take one stressful day to do damage. It's the steady, low-grade, ongoing stress, the kind most women my age have been carrying for decades, that accumulates and takes a quiet toll. What I realized was that I had been running on low-grade stress for years, not dramatic crisis-level stress, just the constant hum of responsibility, of caregiving, of showing up for everyone else while quietly putting myself last. And by the time I was in my late 50s, that showed up in my body in ways I couldn't ignore anymore. The softness around my middle, the fatigue that didn't go away with rest, the feeling of being physically depleted even on days when I hadn't done anything particularly hard. Managing stress is not a luxury. It is a direct act of caring for your physical body. For me, what changed things was a combination of things: intentional rest, shorter to-do lists, more time outside, and being honest with myself about what I could stop carrying. You don't need a dramatic intervention. You need consistent, small choices that tell your nervous system, you are safe, you can rest. If you haven't looked into ashwagandha, I'd encourage you to. Research has suggested it can help support a healthier cortisol response, and it's something I've included as part of my routine. I'll leave a link in the description so you can read more about it. But more than any supplement, the real work is in how we structure our days and how honest we are about what we're carrying. Number 2, and this one might be the most underrated of all 5, is sleep. I cannot tell you how long I treated sleep as something I would get to eventually, as something that could be sacrificed when there was more to do. I wore busy as a badge the way so many women do. And the truth is, my sleep was not good for years. I was waking up in the middle of the night, lying there with thoughts I couldn't turn off, and starting the next day already behind. What I've come to understand, and what the research consistently shows, is that sleep is not passive. Sleep is when your body does most of its repair work. It's when muscle rebuilds, when hormones regulate, when inflammation calms down. When you shortchange sleep, you are shortchanging every other effort you make. Studies have shown that women who consistently sleep between 7 and 8 hours a night have better hormonal profiles, better metabolic function, and better body composition than women who sleep significantly less. I'm not talking about lying in bed for 8 hours while your mind runs. I'm talking about genuinely restful, deep sleep. If you are putting real effort into your nutrition and your movement, but your sleep is a mess, you are working against yourself. I know that's not easy to hear, but it is the truth. Sleep has to come first. What changed for me was taking the end of my day more seriously. I started a real wind-down routine. I stop looking at screens earlier in the evening. I keep the bedroom cool and quiet. I try to be in bed by 10 most nights. It sounds simple, and it is, but simple isn't always easy when you've spent decades doing the opposite. If your sleep is not where it needs to be, I'd invite you to look at that before you look at anything else. Before the supplements, before the workout programs, before anything, get your sleep in order. It is the foundation that everything else rests on. Number 3, and this is one that doesn't get talked about nearly enough, is belly fat. Now I want to be careful here because I know this can feel like a sensitive topic, and I am not here to talk about this from a place of shame or vanity. I'm going to talk about it from a place of health, because the truth is, what's happening inside that tissue matters a great deal to how we feel. Here's what I want you to understand. Excess fat around the abdomen, what's sometimes called visceral fat, is not just stored energy. It is metabolically active tissue, meaning it produces its own hormonal signals. It contributes to inflammation. It disrupts insulin sensitivity, and it creates a feedback loop that makes it harder for the body to maintain the hormonal balance we need to feel strong, energized, and well. After menopause, most women notice that fat distributes differently. It tends to settle more around the middle than it did before. And that shift is real. It's hormonal, it's common, and it's not your fault. But it is something worth addressing, not to look a certain way, but because reducing that visceral fat can genuinely improve how you feel from the inside out. Here's the part that I want you to stay for, because most women go about addressing belly fat in ways that actually make things harder. And that leads me directly into the next 2 points. Because what you do about belly fat matters just as much as the fact that you're trying to address it. Number 4, Too much cardio. I know this sounds counterintuitive. Movement is good. Walking is wonderful. I walk every single day, and I believe deeply in the power of consistent daily movement. But there's a difference between the kind of movement that supports our bodies and the kind that, over time, works against us. What I've seen, and what I experienced myself, is that many women in their 60s respond to feeling softer or heavier by doing more cardio. More time on the treadmill, more long walks at a brisk pace every day, more aerobic classes back to back, week after week. And while the intention is right, the effect can sometimes backfire. Here is why. Prolonged, chronic, steady-state cardio, especially when done in high volume without sufficient recovery, raises cortisol levels. Remember cortisol? The same hormone we talked about in point 1. Excess cardio sends a stress signal to the body, and the body responds by holding on to fat, breaking down muscle tissue, and increasing fatigue. The very thing you were trying to fix gets harder to fix. Now, I want to say clearly, walking is not the problem. Gentle daily walking is one of the best things you can do for your long-term health. What I'm talking about is the pattern of doing too much, too often, without rest, without strength training, and without respecting recovery. What changed for me was understanding that more is not always better, and that the most powerful thing I could add to my routine was not more cardio, but strength training. Building muscle changes everything. It improves metabolism, it improves hormonal balance, it improves how your body uses the food you eat, and it is the single most important investment a woman in her 60s can make in her physical independence. So if you are spending most of your exercise time on long, steady cardio and you're not seeing the results you hoped for, I'd invite you to reconsider your approach. It doesn't have to be extreme. Even 2 or 3 sessions of intentional strength training per week with real resistance, challenging your muscles, can make a significant difference over time. Now I want to come back to what I mentioned at the beginning. These 2 things I have here, and I'll tell you what they are in a moment, because this is where I want to really slow down and explain something that I think trips up a lot of women who are eating carefully, doing their best, and still not seeing the results they want. Number 5 is this: the wrong kind of eating for your hormonal health. I have here with me 2 things that are sitting in my kitchen right now: egg whites, just the whites, no yolks, and a bag of mixed leafy greens. Both of these things are widely considered healthy, and in isolation, they can be. But here's what I want you to understand about why they might be quietly working against your goals. Let's start with the fat conversation. After menopause, and certainly into our 60s, our hormonal system depends on dietary fat to function. Hormones, including the ones that regulate energy, mood, sleep, and body composition, are produced from cholesterol, and cholesterol comes from fat. When women dramatically reduce their fat intake in an effort to lose weight or eat lighter, they can inadvertently reduce the raw material their bodies need to produce and balance those hormones. What I realized is that I had spent years being afraid of fat, eating only egg whites because the yolk had too much cholesterol, choosing the leanest possible protein at every meal, avoiding olive oil because of the calories. And the truth is, my body needed more than I was giving it. Healthy fats, from whole eggs, from olive oil, from avocado, from salmon, from nuts, these are not things to fear. These are things to include intentionally. Now, let's talk about the leafy greens. They're wonderful. Please eat them. But what happens for a lot of women who are trying to manage their weight is that they fill their plates with greens and vegetables, and they cut out the things that feel heavier: potatoes, rice, fruit, whole grains. They go very low carbohydrate, thinking that carbs are the enemy. Here's what research consistently shows. Very low carbohydrate intake has been associated with reduced production of the hormones we need for muscle maintenance, energy regulation, and metabolic function. Carbohydrates, particularly complex, whole food carbohydrates, are not something most women should be eliminating entirely. The goal is balance, and the biggest piece of that balance that most women in their 60s are genuinely missing is protein. If I could tell you one nutritional shift that made the biggest difference for me, it would be this. I started eating significantly more protein at every meal. Greek yogurt in the morning, a palm or two of chicken, fish, or lean meat at lunch, eggs with dinner, or a protein-rich snack in the afternoon. Because protein is what your body uses to build and maintain muscle. And muscle is not optional after 60. It is the physical foundation of your independence. So if you are eating mostly salads and egg whites and light meals, and you're wondering why you feel soft, tired, and like your body isn't responding, please hear me. You may not need to eat less. You may need to eat more of the right things, specifically more protein, more healthy fat, more real, whole food that your body can actually use. So there you have it, the 5 things that could be quietly working against your strength and vitality after 60. The first is chronic stress and what it does to your cortisol, your hormones, and your body composition when left unaddressed. The second is poor sleep, the most undervalued and most powerful thing you can improve if you're trying to feel better, look better, and support your hormonal health. The third is excess belly fat, not something to feel ashamed of, but something worth understanding because visceral fat has a real impact on how your body functions from the inside. The fourth is doing too much chronic cardio at the expense of strength training, a very common pattern for women our age, and one that can quietly undermine everything else you're doing right. And the fifth is the wrong nutritional approach, cutting fat, cutting carbohydrates, eating too little protein, and believing that eating less is always the answer. Here's what I want you to take away from all of this. None of it has to be extreme. That's not what I do, and that's not what I'd encourage you to do. What I've found over the last several years of actually living this day in and day out is that consistent, balanced, intentional choices add up to something real over time. Little by little, your body responds. Little by little, the strength comes back. Little by little, you start to feel like yourself again, not the version of yourself from 30 years ago, but a version of yourself that is grounded, capable, energized, and at home in her own body. That's what's possible. And it doesn't require a dramatic overhaul or a perfect plan. You can start where you are with what you have, making one better choice at a time. If this was helpful, I'd love for you to subscribe before you go. I share videos here regularly for women in their 60s and beyond who want real grounded information about building strength, maintaining their health, and aging in a way that feels alive rather than inevitable. No extremes, no miracle promises, just what actually works. I'll also leave some additional information in the description below, including more on some of the things I mentioned today, particularly around sleep, stress management, and protein. I hope you found this useful. I'll see you in the next one.